the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. The Prime Minister sits Shiva. What are these Jews protesting? Religion in the 2012 election, and more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now in this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. The Prime Minister of Israel was sitting Shiva this week. Benzion Netanyahu, father of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, passed away at the age of 102. The Prime Minister could be the first head of state ever to sit Shiva for a parent while in office. TJC wasn't able to confirm whether any prior Israeli Prime Minister had ever done so. The most prominent public mourning in memory prior to this was that of Senator Joseph Lieberman, who in 2005 drew attention when the normally clean-cut senator grew a mourning beard. The senior Netanyahu had been one of the original Zionist militants, allied with the right-wing movement of Zev Jabotinsky, in whose movement he became editor-in-chief of the newspaper. A less discussed part of Benzion Netanyahu's biography is a rarely mentioned part of U.S. Jewish history, the effort by some Jewish activists to persuade FDR to stop the Holocaust. Though only recently exposed to English when he started this work around 1940, Netanyahu's passionate writing on the subject came to embody the movement. After the war, Netanyahu became a professor at various American universities before returning to Israel permanently in 1976. While one of his sons, Yoni, was killed in the famous raid on Entebbe, he lived to see another son elected prime minister twice. The prime minister received condolence calls and letters from many around the globe, including from Palestinian leaders Mahmoud Abbas and Salam Fayyad of Fatah. Netanyahu canceled all of his diplomatic appointments for the week. Among those able to pay a personal visit to Netanyahu during his week of Shiva was head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Senator John Kerry of Massachusetts. And while Netanyahu is thinking less about politics this week than usual, the politician who led the opposition against him is stepping down from the Knesset. Tzippi Livni had been a leader in the Kadima party since 2006, and in 2009 led her party to win more seats in the parliamentary elections than did Netanyahu's Likud party. She famously rejected offers from both Netanyahu and some other right-wing parties to create a coalition to govern, and instead led the official opposition to the Netanyahu government. Livni had already lost control of her party in a March primary, and now she's leaving Knesset entirely. In a parting message, she took a swipe at the Netanyahu government, saying she was, quote, not sorry for refusing to sell out the government to the ultra-Orthodox in order to form a government. Speaking of selling and the ultra-Orthodox, we've seen many stories in recent months about how censorship of women has affected their media market, and now Walmart is getting in on the act. This picture from a Twitter user shows a sign at a Walmart near the ultra-Orthodox enclave of Kiryas Joel in upstate New York, declaring, attention Kiryas Joel shoppers, no magazines sold in this aisle. The goal is presumably to give the ultra-Orthodox a place to shop without seeing magazine covers. Well, Kiryas Joel is famous for the way it has mixed religion and politics. But what's the national outlook for religion and politics in the 2012 election? A panel at Yeshiva University was trying to answer that question, as Christian Needon reports.
A panel of political experts assembled on a Manhattan stage this week to discuss the role of religion in the 2012 election cycle, including how much impact Jews will have on the re-election of Barack Obama. Among those speaking on that topic at the Yeshiva University Forum, Religion and the 2012 Election, was the host of PBS program Need to Know, Jeff Greenfield, who mentioned states where Jews could affect the larger vote.
New York and California are so overwhelmingly Democratic that if Obama's in trouble in those states, we could all go home now. He will lose. And the Jewish population in other states is really too small, unless you're talking about a Florida kind of vote where it's 500 votes. Florida, the Jewish vote is something on the order of 4%, I think, of the electorate. So, and Obama got 80% of the vote in Florida last time. If he would have dropped to 65%, you do the math, that could cost him a point or two statewide. But in Florida, as we have seen, that could make a difference.
With that in mind, political consultant and pollster Anna Greenberg said Obama is currently down in the polls among Jewish voters compared to 2008, but that doesn't mean he won't recover by November.
He's getting somewhere between 61 and 65% of the Jewish vote right now. But there were, at the comparable period in 2008, he was also underperforming among Jews. Ultimately, he got 78%. Now, I don't know. Earlier, Jeff, you mentioned that Sarah Palin probably played a role, and I think that's probably right. I think Sarah Palin was one of the main reasons McCain lost. and I think it had a big impact on Jewish voters. So I think it remains to be seen if he ultimately underperforms among Jewish voters.
When it comes to American voters in general, though, Peter Steinfels, who heads Fordham University's Center for Religion and Culture, said polls show that religion and politics are an increasingly distasteful combination when choosing a candidate to vote for.
The Pew survey data that in general people are increasingly fed up with religion in electoral and public life. That we've seen, this is, I think, the highest number of people that essentially think that politicians should keep their mouths closed about this, and then the churches should stay out of partisan politics.
To hear more from the Yeshiva University Forum, Religion and the 2012 Election, please tune into the full broadcast edition of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Christian. A big story in politics last year was the Occupy movement, launched by Occupy Wall Street. This week, on May Day, the movement was hoping to launch into spring with a renewed vigor, and several Jewish organizations were out in force. Meredith Gansman has that story.
In honor of May Day, May 1st, or International Workers' Day, workers' rights activists have taken up the call to legalize, unionize, and organize. The Occupy Wall Street movement have asked the people not to go to work, not to go to school, go shopping, go banking, or even do trading. And as you can see by the masses behind me in Union Square Park, that's exactly what they did. May Day, May 1st, is the Day of the Worker and is traditionally celebrated outside the United States as an annual Labor Day. But this May Day, spurred by the Occupy movement, workers here in America took to the streets, a day without the 99%.
I'm not satisfied with income inequality. In general, I'm not satisfied with the fact that certain groups are not seen as equal as with others. What I support about the Occupy movement is mostly bringing about a culture of awareness, political awareness, and a culture of being able to communicate with one another.
We don't have as much control over our futures anymore as we used to. The education system is broken, the labor system is broken, and I think that this is just like the time when the political imagination is taking off and trying to fix those things.
One organization supporting workers this May Day is the Jewish Labor Committee, which has been a voice for the labor movement since 1934. And while in recent decades union membership numbers have been down, with labor issues often taking a back seat to other concerns, the JLC's executive director Martin Schwartz said this mass protest was evidence that people are again concentrating on labor rights and reform.
People are beginning to realize that the interests of the working class people are not being addressed. And so in order to focus attention on the needs of working people, this is the day to do it.
Though the labor movement has found a fresh voice in the Occupy movement, Schwartz noted that the Jewish community was instrumental in the founding of organized labor in the United States.
When we think about the workers, the women who lost their lives in the Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire, but even before that, who marched in the streets to advocate for their rights, for better working conditions, safe working conditions, decent wages for their families, we stand on their shoulders today.
Executive Director of Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, Marjorie Dove Kent, added that Jews have always been on both sides of the labor movement.
We used to be the workers and maybe now we're the owners, and I think it's important to remember that Jews have always been in the struggle for organized labor in this country, and that we've also been the ones on the other side of the bargaining table, and that we still are. There are still, Jews who are fighting for minimum wage jobs, and there are Jews who are the CEOs of major corporations that don't have good labor practices.
To see more from the May Day Occupy Wall Street protests, tune into the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. That's all for this week. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 528, IO Optimum Channel 291, RCN Channel 268, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, Cox Channel 1, Frontier Communications, and now on Comcast Cable in the on-demand menu under Premium Channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.